Hello, I wanted to show you how we can go out and scrape a website using Excel and then bring it into Excel and do some data manipulation on it. So in this video, I'm going to cover extracting these stats from the Major League Baseball website. And then I'm going to show you how to do some basic data cleaning on some of the columns, and then show you how to pivot these stats columns so that they come down into one column, and you'll see that when we get there. To get started, I'm just going to copy this URL. Then I'm going to minimize that web browser, and I've got Excel open here. I'm going to open up a blank workbook, and I want to get this data into Power Query. So I'm going to go to the data menu, get data. I could also just do from web right here, but you can also find it from other sources and from web there. You don't have this option on a Mac, and so you'd have to copy and paste from the website, which will have slightly different results. So I paste the URL in that box and click OK. And Excel is basically going out and browsing that URL, and it finds here a table, an HTML table that says, hey, I could scrape this data. So we click on table, and then we're going to click transform data so that we can load it into Power Query so that we can do some manipulation with it. Now here in Power Query, you can see that all our column headers seem to have stuttered. They're doubled up. So if we flip back and look at, you can see we have G and AB and player, and all those got doubled up. And that's probably just an artifact of the HTML and how it got scraped. So we'll show you how to clean that up. But you'll also notice in the player column, it's mixed the player's first name, middle initial, last name. So if we take a look, we got first, last name there. I guess that's not a middle initial, so we're just going to go extract the first, last name. And then they also have the position here, and that's also in that first column. It's embedded here. C for catcher, SS for shortstop. And then we also have the rank that appears at the beginning and at the end. And so this is just an example of basic data cleaning that we're going to perform. And so let's go ahead and do that first. So I can actually, Power Query has kind of like a flash fill option to create a new column. I'm going to minimize this bottom window so we have more room to see. I'm going to select the player column. I'm going to go to add column and column from examples. And then I'm just going to, let's say we want to pull out the name first. So I'm going to take Blake Sable and I type it in, and I just keep giving it examples. So I'm going to say Tim Lopez, type it in, and then it's making guesses at what I want to do, and it's not quite right. So I'm going to say Tim Locastro, I'm just type it in. And then as we go down, it's getting it right. I go down to where it stopped. I'm just going to keep training it. So Nathaniel Lowe, hit enter, and you can see at this point, it probably does the right thing. And so I'm going to accept that. I'm going to click OK. It's my new column. I'll call this name. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to create another column where I extract out the position. So I'm going to go highlight the player column and click on column from examples. And Blake Sable is the catcher. Tim Lopez is shortstop. You can see it seems to do the right thing. Second base, left field, and we get down here to first base. We're going to say first base. Now, did it keep things right? Nope. We're going to say left field. Then we're going to go back and train. What does Donovan play? Second base. And sometimes this feature works great and sometimes it doesn't. And so you can try it. And here it's not looking very successful. So first space, let's see if we can't train it all the way down here. There we go. Second base. See, it's having a hard time finding a pattern that matches this. And so we may not be as successful there. We'd have to resort to some other things. So let me show you one other option we could do. I'm just going to go ahead and load it into Excel. And let's go ahead and try Excel's flash fill feature. So I'm going to insert a column next to it. And here I plan to extract out the position. So I'll name that. I'm going to say CSS. What's DH? Let's go back and look. Maybe that's where we're... Yep, so Derek Hall is DH. We'll give it a couple more SS, and then when we've given it quite a few, we can go to the cell underneath it and hit Control E. And that seems to have done the trick. We just spot check a few. And so I'm going to accept that, and then I'm going to go ahead and invoke the Power Query Editor again. I'm going to go to Data, pull down and go to Launch Power Query Editor. I can't remember if it'll pull in that new column or not. Doesn't look like it will. So I'm going to cancel back out of there. Then I'm just going to go ahead and pull this new data in. So I'm going to say from table or range. We'll call this table 1 just so we can increment it. And there's our position. And so now we can proceed. I'm just to keep all our common columns together, I'm just going to drag this name over to the left. There we go. So I've extracted, and I could go ahead and extract out the rank too. So I may just click on this and go add column. Here we could actually just extract that first one, but I think it's going to do the trick here. I'm going to go 1, 2, and there it seems to get what we want. I could have just easily created an incrementing number column. So we've taken the rank. I'm going to rename that rank. Going to be an easier way to bring that over. All right, so now I've extracted everything I want, so I'm just going to remove the original column. And now you'll notice that we have these duplicated column headers. And so I'll show you one way that we can do that. You could just go through and start double clicking and do team, and keep going like that. G, and you could go all the way across. But I've tried this in class and did the Paul Bunyan test, and a student wasn't able to complete that faster than the approach that I was going to tell you. So one other way you can do this is we're just going to take all these columns and we're going to pivot them down into their own column. And I'll show you what I mean by that. One little thing I'm going to take care of before is there was some extra HTML stuff that came with this last column, the ops. I'm just going to take that out so it has the same look as the others. So then I'm going to start at that last stats column. I'm going to bring it over, and I'm just going to go ahead and take the team column too because it's duplicated. So the way I did that is I clicked on the first column, I scrolled over to the last column, I held down shift and I clicked, and it highlighted all of them. And now I'm going to go transform, and in this any column section, there's an unpivot columns. And when I unpivot the column, it creates a new attribute column and a value column. So notice that under the attribute are all the column headers that we had previously. One other thing to notice is I'm going to undo this. I'll go highlight this again so we're ready. Before I unpivoted the columns, whoops, notice I've got 25 rows. And that corresponds to, there were 25 on a page here. And so I have 25 rows. When I go to unpivot, I now have 425 rows. And so if you just do the math here, I have team, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then I have 25 players. And I basically took 17 times 25. And let's see what that is. Ready? 17 times 25 is 425 rows. So for every player, notice how Blake is duplicated. For every player, he's duplicated 17 times. Right there at 18, we start over. That's the team. And so hopefully you can see how that shifted. We just transposed this. So I'm going to undo that one more time. Looks like I undid too many. Here we go. So I'm going to do it one more time. I go from 25 rows. I unpivot. It takes all those column headers and sticks them in the attribute. And it takes the values under each of those column headers and it sticks them in the value. And so now that I've got all the column headers here, I can actually kind of extract out just that first part. So I'm going to do some cleaning on those column headers. I'm going to add a column from example. I'll say I just want to take team, and then it says, looks like you want the text before the delimiter. And that's just the text before the space. And that's exactly what I want. It guessed right. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to move this over here. That's going to be my new column headers. And I'm going to remove the old one. Now that I have this, I'm going to keep it highlighted and I'm going to pivot these column headers back over to the right. So here we go. I'm going to go transform, pivot column. And this window basically says, hey, it looks like you want me to take the unique values, there's 17 of them, in text before delimiter and make them column headers. But I need you to tell me under each of the new column headers, where am I going to grab the values that go under those headers? And I say, you're going to get them from the values column. Click OK. And it pushes them back out there. And now I've got cleaned up headers. And so that's a quick, easy way to modify all those. And it looks like my rank may be messed up, but we'll come back and fix that. So that's one way to modify all those. I'm going to undo that. Where's our value? I'm going to delete this again. Looks like we got all ones in there too last time. So I'm going to try this one more time. I'm going to go pivot. Let's see if there's any advanced object. I'm going to say don't aggregate. I think that was the problem before. So I want you to take the values from the value column. And I think before I did count, I'm going to say don't aggregate. I'm going to click OK. And now that looks better. Those look like the real statistics that I had. So Now I've got those statistics correct. And then sometimes you may want your data in this format, but you also may want to be able to make a separate line for, say, games played, at-bats, runs, home runs, or those are hits, doubles, triples. And you may want to like keep them in a column, and you'll just have to experiment with this in Tableau. So what I'd suggest is you export this. So here, I'll show you how to do it. I'm going to say table A. I'm going to call this table wide. And then I'm going to duplicate that table and call this table long. And so I'm going to now unpivot all these stats columns. I'll highlight them all. And then I'm going to unpivot them. And so each of these will be the stat for that player. So here's Blake Sable's games played, Blake Sable's at-bats, and there's the value of that stat. And so this is the wide version of the data. Sorry, this is the long version of the data. It has 400 rows. This is the wide version of the data. It has 25 rows, but 20 columns, whereas our table long had 6 columns. And so then what you can do is I'll just close and load, and let it bring in my table long and my table wide. And I would encourage you to take this and drag it into Tableau and try to make data vises with the table wide and data vises with the table long, so that you get an idea of the advantages of both of those formats. So there you have just an example of some basic data cleaning using Power Query. And you have an example of data transformation where we're transposing the columns, where we call it pivoting the columns from wide to long. Hope that was helpful.